Good day, everyone. Welcome to Educ 505 or Education 505 Research Seminar and Practicum. Today's video lecture is part of a series of video lectures on how to write a thesis proposal or dissertation proposal or simply a research paper. And as you can see, the title of this video lecture is How to Write the Background of the Study, or how to write the background of the study of a thesis, or the background of the study of a dissertation, or simply the background of the study of a research paper. And I put here part one because there are two more parts that I will produce in the coming days. And as you can see, part one talks about the meaning, nature, and dynamics and the core elements of a background of the study and the techniques in writing this part of your thesis proposal or your research paper. Now, I begin with the discussion on the meaning, nature, and dynamics and the core elements of the background of the study because it is always a good idea that we teach our students the what and the why before we dive into the how of any topic, like in this case, how to write the background of the study. And then in the case of the techniques in writing the background of the study, this is very important because as is well known, all parts of a research paper, all parts of the thesis or dissertation have their own rules, in writing them. So when we write the background of the study, there are rules to follow there. Like, for example, you need to articulate the research problem or the research gap, and then the research goal and the thesis statements. And when writing, for example, the literature review, there are some rules to follow, or rules of thumbs to follow, so that you will be able to write it in a systematic and a smooth and logical manner. And you will include, if you know the techniques and the rules in writing these parts, you will be able to include those important aspects that the readers or panel members, members of a thesis committee are looking for when reviewing the paper. So we need to know these techniques to avoid, for example, simply writing the background of the study or any section of your research from all angles. So again, there are techniques or rules to follow. So that's what I will do in this video lecture. And then in part two, I will briefly discuss the two styles or models of writing, not just the background of the study, but all parts of thesis in terms of structure. And so, as is well known, as you may already know, there are two major styles or models of writing in terms of structure, and that's deductive and inductive style of writing. So in part two, again, I will present the two major styles of writing, deductive and inductive, and then the main contents of part two is I will be presenting an excellent sample of a background of the study written using the deductive style of writing. So, and I will share and discuss with you the techniques now involved in writing that excellent sample of a background of the study. And then I will do this, and then I will do the same in part three. That is, again, I will present very briefly, discuss very briefly the two styles of writing, deductive and deductive style, and then I will present and discuss an excellent sample of a background of the study using um, an inductive style of writing. And then before I proceed, we have to remember that when we say background of the study, it's the same with the rationale of the study, or simply the introduction of of your thesis. So the background of the study, rationale of the study, or introduction are one and the same. And when writing this part, we are following the same rules of thumbs, okay? So much for the overview of this series of video lectures on how to write the background of the study. Let me now dive into the discussion on the meaning, nature, dynamics, and the core elements of a background of the study, as well as the techniques on how to write it. And please note that I wrote my notes here so that I will be able to present my discussion in a logical and smooth manner, so that I won't be able to miss important aspects. And what I will do is read my notes and then do some side discussion. Okay, so let's begin. So this is again how to write the background of the study, part one, and then we have the contents, meaning, nature, dynamics, and core elements of the background of the study, and techniques in writing the background of the study. So always remember that throughout the discussion in part one, I will focus on these two major points. Okay. So I will read again my notes and then do some side discussion. So before we embark on a detailed discussion on how to write the background of the study of your proposed research or thesis or dissertation, it is important to first discuss its meaning and the core elements that it should contain. So my arguments, again, as I already intimated previously, is that students will be able to make sense of the how if they know exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I always begin with the what, and then I explain the why, and then I teach my students the how. So I don't dive right away into the how of things before explaining to them the what and the why. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. So this is obviously because understanding the nature of the background of the study and research and knowing exactly what to include in it allow us to have both greater control and clear direction of the writing process. So in addition to what I have just mentioned already. So if you know what we are doing and why we're doing it, then students will be able to make sense of the how, and at the same time they will have both greater control and clear direction of the writing process. So what really is the background of the study, and what are the core elements that it should contain? The background of the study, and as we already know, the background of the study or the rationale of the study usually forms the first section of the introduction to a research paper. So if you have a thesis or a dissertation or a research paper, it always begins with the background of the study. Sometimes we call that background of the study and problem articulation or problem formulation, or we say rationale of the study. Okay, so the background of the study, which usually forms the first section of the introduction to a research paper or thesis, provides the overview of the study. And we have to remember that, and I have to preempt the discussion on this, although I will emphasize this later. But I want to emphasize at this point that the background of the study is, at least from my based on my own experience and understanding, is the most important part of any research paper. So the background of the study is not just a we call that in Filipino palamuti. We do not just write this for the sake of writing, for the sake of the aesthetic purpose, but the background of the study is very important, the most important part of any research paper, because it serves as the foundation of the entire trajectory of your thesis or your dissertation or your research paper. And as I will show later, when we write the background of the study, it is here where we articulate the research problem or doc, and then the research goal, and the thesis statement. Three major elements that we're looking for in the background of the study. When, for example, reviewers like me, I reviewed a lot of papers, thesis, dissertation on a regular basis. That's what we're looking for, what I am looking for when reviewing the background of the study. And my argument is, once the background of the study is written well, written according to the rules, it will set the sail of the research journey, and it will, again, not just provide the overview of the study, but also provide a clear direction of the research. So the background of the study, again, is the most important part, because in addition to what I have just explained, this is the most important part because the background of the study articulates, includes the research gap or the research problem. And as I discussed in our previous, as I mentioned in our previous discussion on problem formulation or gap spotting, there is no research without a research gap. There is no research activity without the research problem. And since it is in the background of the study that we articulate the research gap or research problem, then this is the most important part of the research paper. Yeah. In other words, it is that section of the research paper or thesis that establishes the context of the study, including the problem, of course, the research problem of the gap, that the researcher would want to see addressed in the paper. Its main function is to explain why the proposed research is important and essential to the understanding the main aspects of the study. The background of the study, therefore, is the section of the research paper or thesis that identifies, as I already mentioned, the problem or gap of the study that needs to be addressed. That should be to be addressed, and justifies the need for conducting the study. So it is in the background of the study that the researcher articulates not just the problem and the research goal, but also the compelling reasons why we need to conduct this research, why we need to pursue this research. It also articulates the main goal of the study, as already mentioned, and the thesis statement, that is the main claim or arguments of the paper. By the way, when we say thesis statements, we normally understand that as the entire idea, the main idea of the research. And sometimes the thesis statement includes the research goal and the rationale behind why we wish to conduct this research. But most of the time, because there are two major types of thesis statements, the argumentative way of framing it or articulating it, and the expository way of articulating the thesis statements. And so since most of the time I use the argumentative manner of articulating the thesis statement, so in my example or in my research paper, I always write the thesis statements in an argumentative manner, and so in my research, the thesis statement is always understood as the main argument or the main contention, the main claim of my paper. So these are the three major important points or elements that researchers should includes, articulates in writing the background of the study. Of course, this is in addition to the other core elements that we need to include in the background of the study. So given this brief understanding of the background of the study, we can anticipate what readers or thesis committee members expect from it. Before I proceed to discussing, explaining this core elements or mentioning or narrating this core elements, please remember that when we write, not just the background of the study, when we write our research paper, our research proposal, all sections of our research proposal, we have to remember that we are writing from the vantage points of the readers, or if it, or in the case of a thesis or dissertation, we are writing from the vantage points of the panel, or of the panel members, of the thesis committee members. And so we need to always remember that when we write scholarly papers or thesis or research in this case, we are always under obligation to to our readers. We're always under obligation to write our paper in a way that our readers or committee members or thesis committee members can understand it easily. And so when writing the background of the study, for example, we need to anticipate the questions of the panel members, of our readers, and 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 we need to address those questions in our writing so that we avoid, for example, major revisions later on. Yeah. So as we can see, the background of the study should contain the following major points. So these are the important points to remember when writing the background of the study. First is a brief discussion on what is known about the topic under investigation. When I present a sample, a concrete example of a background of the study, point number one may include discussion on the meaning of the topic under investigation. For example, if the topic is mathematical anxiety, the example that I will present in a while, the main topic is mathematical anxiety. And so since mathematical anxiety is a highly nuanced, highly specific, or highly nuanced term or jargon specific to math people, and so mathematical anxiety, or the term mathematical anxiety, is not really understandable by people from other disciplines like English or philosophy or history. And so the researcher needs to define the term, at the beginning of the section on the background of the study. So again, a discussion on what is known about the topic under this investigation includes a discussion on the meaning, for example, of the topic under investigation and its nature and dynamics and things like that. And then second point is an articulation of the research gap or problem that needs to be addressed. So as I already mentioned many times already, a research begins with a research problem or a research gap. So there is no research without the research problem. There's no research without the research gap that the researcher wants to fill in the particular study. Okay, and for a extensive discussion on problem formulation or gap spotting, please refer to my other video lecture on, I'll provide that in the description below, the link to problem formulation and gap spotting, in case you are not yet familiar with the process or the techniques on in problem formulation and gap spotting. So as I mentioned, any research, all types of research begins with the discussion or problem formulation or gap spotting. And as I always advise my students, do not start writing your background of the study if you don't have a research problem or if you don't have a research gap. So once you have already a research problem or a research gap, then it is here in the background of the study that you need that you articulated. Okay, so again, the second major elements that you need to include in writing the background of the study is, the research gap or the problem that needs to be addressed. And the third is what the researcher would like to do or aim to achieve in the study. And that's, or in other words, you need to articulate the research goal. And please remember that all types of research should only have one major goal, and the rest are sub goals or objectives. I need to emphasize this one because based on my experience in reviewing thesis proposals, dissertation proposals, or the entire thesis, paper, I notice I always encounter these common mistakes because young scholars, maybe because they are not guided properly, especially if they don't see their advisor regularly and they are not guided properly by their advisor, or they just, I don't know, but the point is, based on my experience, the common mistakes, or one of the common mistakes that researcher, master students, even PhD students, commit is that they have several goals, articulated in the dissertation or thesis proposal. For example, when I read the background of the study, um, the researcher mentions or articulates a research goal. And then when I proceed to reviewing the literature review, then there is another goal. The researcher articulates another goal that is not consistent with the previous one. And when I read the methodology parts, the researcher articulates a different third goal. And so to the point that I don't exactly know what the researcher would like to do. So again, please take note that all types of research should only have one major goal, because there's only one major problem that you want to see addressed in the paper. All the rest are sub goals or maybe objectives, and all of them are in line with your major goal. Okay, so you will understand me fully when I present a concrete sample of a background in the study later on in this video lecture. And then the fourth elements that you need to include in the background of the study is the thesis statement. That is the main arguments or contention of the paper, which also serves as the reason why the researcher would want to pursue the study. As I already intimated previously, when we say thesis statements, we normally understand that as the main idea of the research or the paper or the thesis or dissertation. And again, sometimes the thesis statements includes the research goal and the compelling reasons why you want to do this research. But again, in my research, I normally frame the thesis statements in an argumentative manner. So two major types of thesis statement: argumentative and expository. I normally use argumentative style, and so that is why my thesis statements in almost all my research is expressed in the form of an argument as to why they need to pursue this research. So I need to emphasize these three major parts of the background of the study before I proceed. When writing your background of the study, and when I, as a reviewer, as an advisor, review the background of the study, I am looking for these three major things. What is the problem that the researcher would like to see addressed in the paper? Or what is the gap that she or he wants to fill? And then second is, what is the main goal of the research? What is the aim of the researcher? And third is, what is the main arguments, the rationale behind the conduct of the research? Some researcher would say the compelling reasons why there is a need to do this research or pursue this research. And then the fifth core element is the major significance or contribution of the study to a particular discipline. We need to remember as well that we do not just do research for the sake of doing research, or we do not just do research because that is part of your master's program or master's studies or PhD studies, but we do research because there is a problem to be addressed, there's a problem to be solved, or there's a gap that you want to see filled in. But also at the same time, when doing research, you do research because you want to contribute something, for example, in the already established body of knowledge in that particular discipline. So you want to offer something new. And so, for example, there is one of the mega trends today is COVID-19, for example. COVID-19 virus, and there's a lot of discussions and research in that topic. And then and then for example, you want to contribute in, and then you have identified some of the problems or implications of the COVID-19, like the implication of COVID-19 in education, how COVID-19 impacted, for example, education in the rural areas or in public schools and things like that. And so you want to contribute in addressing some of the problems that you discovered in that aspect, in that context. And so and so and so you research, you want to conduct research, you want to pursue that particular study because you know that you will be able to contribute something in that context, in that discipline. And so it is here in the background of the study that you articulate that elements, the significance or the contribution of your study to a particular discipline. And so that when I read, for example, the background of the study or the rationale of the study, I already have an idea, a clear idea of what the researcher would like to do and why he or she is doing it, and the major significance or contribution, yeah, of this particular study. And lastly, depending on the nature of the study, an articulation of the hypothesis of the study. Especially in experimental research, we normally, in experimental research, we normally put or articulate our hypotheses. And it is, again, in the background of the study that you mention this. Okay? Thus, when writing the background of the study, you should plan and structure it based on the major points just mentioned. With this, you will have a clear picture of the flow of the tasks that need to be completed in writing the section of your research or thesis proposal, or thesis as a whole. Okay, so as you can see, when writing the background of the study, you need to be guided by these core elements. And so I need to emphasize this one as well. I heard a lot of some of the feedbacks that I heard from my advisees, from my colleagues, from my friends in research in the academies, that they said, well, when I write my thesis or a section of my research, I get stuck along the way. They could not proceed anymore because they could not proceed anymore because they don't have any idea about what to do next. Well, to me, I have experienced that as well. When I was young, I experienced getting lost along the way. And the main reason why I get lost, I get stuck along the way in writing the background of the study or the literature review and other section of the research is because I don't know the rules of thumb in writing that section, or I don't have the idea of what to do in that particular section, in the background of the study, for example. Like young scholars, for example, because they are not guided properly when they are asked to write their thesis proposal, and then they just sit down and then grab some copies of samples of thesis in the library and begin writing their own without knowing or formulating their problem first, without identifying the gap that they want to fill in, and without knowing the technique in writing their thesis proposal, and in this case, the background of the study. And so as we can observe, Young scholars will write their background of the study or the thesis proposal um, by simply copying and pasting sources from from yeah, copying and pasting um, ideas and thoughts and statements from different sources. So that what happened is the background of the study, for example, in this case, the background of the study is written or what I mean is, so what happened is the background of the study is appears to be, a conglomeration of random thoughts taken from somewhere to anywhere. And this is a common mistake of young scholars. They just write whatever they want to write simply because it's in relation to the topic that they want to see addressed, or they want to see addressed, or the problem that they want to see addressed in their paper. And so what happened is that when they defend their thesis proposal, for example, or dissertation proposal, they got a major revision from from the panel as a recommendation because look, they're not following, the rules in writing the background of the study, or the rules in writing all other parts of the thesis proposal. So again, the topic here is how to write the background of the study, and or how to write the rationale of the study. And when writing that parts, please be guided with these rules. And don't worry, because I will be giving 3 samples of a background of the study now, in this lecture and in the other 2 parts. At this point, again, I am still on the what and the why. Later on, we will be talking about the how. Okay? Now, how do you go about writing the background of the study in your proposed research? I am now moving to the next topic, which is the techniques in writing the background of the study. And there are 3 major parts here. The first part is how to write the opening paragraphs of the background of the study. And then the second part is how to write the body of the background of the study, and how to write the concluding parts of the background of the study. So I will present later on the image of a sitting cat. But even if we, you know, even if I don't present that picture, if you look at this outline, we can imagine that, if we imagine a sitting cat, for example, the opening paragraphs represents the head, and then the body represents the body of the cat, and the concluding part represents the tail of the cat. So at this point, I will now discuss the techniques on how to write the background of the study, and I will start with the opening paragraphs. Okay? And then the body and the concluding parts. The body and the concluding part will follow. So, how to write the opening paragraphs of the background of the study. Now, to begin with, let us assume that you already have conducted a preliminary research on your chosen topic. That is, you already have read a lot of literature and gathered relevant information for writing the background of this study. So we let's assume that you have the data already, that you have the information through, for example, reading a lot of literature, or you conducted initial interviews and observation. So again, let us assume that you have the necessary information, because look, this is how I write any part of my paper. Before I sit down and begin writing, I have to read a lot of literature, make some notes, and then if possible, interview respondents or prospective respondents, interview them, gain some insights, and observe what's going on around, and make notes, like field notes. And then once I have those materials, I will outline the points that I will write that I will include in that section, and then begin writing. So in that way, because I have all the information, not necessarily all, but I have already the data or the information that I need, that I will use in writing that section. And since I know the rules of thumb in writing that section of the paper, like in this case, background of the study, then I won't get stuck along the way. So that I would be able to write the background of the study in a smooth and logical manner. Okay? Let us also assume that you already have identified the gap of your proposed research and have already developed the research questions and thesis statements. So again, do not write your background of the study if you don't have a research problem or if you don't have a research gap. Because again, all research begins with, all types of research begin with a problem or a gap. So again, for a detailed and exhaustive extensive discussion on problem formulation or how problem formulation or gap spotting, please refer to my other video lecture. So again, we have already read materials on your chosen topic. You have conducted initial interview. We assume that you have conducted initial interview or observations, and you already have a research problem. So we will now write the opening paragraphs of your background on the study. So we will just put together everything that you have researched into a background of the study. But in this section, let's just focus on writing the opening paragraphs. I will present later the body. It is important to note at this point that there are different styles of writing the background of the study. Hence, what I will be sharing with you here is not just the only way of writing the background of the study. So there are a lot of styles in writing the background of the study, but mine is the most common one. So this is just one of those styles in writing the background of the study. You may copy my style, or you may be you just want to be guided by it, or you just want to gain some insights from this. And as a matter of fact, there is no one size fits all style of writing this part of the research or thesis. At the end of the day, you are free to develop your own. However, whatever style it would be, it always starts with a plan which structure the writing process into stages or steps. The steps that I will share with you here are just some of the most effective ways of writing the background of the study. And please note that it is always a good idea to begin the background of your study by giving an overview of your research topic. This may include providing a definition of the key concepts of your research or highlighting the main developments of the research topic. And you will understand me when I present the sample now. So let us suppose that the topic of your study is the lived experiences of students with mathematical anxiety. That's the topic that you want to see, that you want to develop, to address in this research. So, for example, the problem is students, as I will articulate later, students in New Zealand, high school students, senior high school students in New Zealand are experiencing mathematical anxiety, and so and the argument is, if we don't address this problem, that is, students are experiencing mathematical anxiety, then it may, for example, it may jeopardize the quality of instruction. That educational system may produce half-baked graduates and things like that. And so therefore, there is a need to address that problem, students having or experiencing mathematical anxiety. And one of the best ways to address that problem is to conduct a phenomenological research on the topic. And so we need to know, for example, the difficulties and challenges that these students are experiencing on a daily basis, so that once we know, for example, the challenges and difficulties that they encounter on a daily basis, then the researcher will be in the best position to offer some alternatives or some solutions to the problem. And so therefore, a study that talks about, that deals with the lived experiences of this, or the lived experiences of these students, is very important. Okay, so again, let us suppose that the topic of your study is the lived experiences of students with mathematical anxiety. Here, you may start the background of your study with a discussion on the meaning, nature, and dynamics of the term mathematical anxiety. The reason for this is too obvious, and as I already mentioned a while ago, mathematical anxiety is a highly technical term, a highly nuanced term that is specific to mathematics or to mathematics people. Hence, this term is not readily understandable to non-specialists in this field. So since mathematical anxiety is specific to mathematics people, it's a highly nuanced term, and since this is not readily understandable by people from history or English and literature or philosophy or any other discipline, and since in writing we always think of our readers, that every time we write in scholarly writing, every time we articulate our thoughts, we articulate our interpretations, we have to remember, we have to be mindful, we have to remember our readers, we have to write or express our thoughts in a way that our reader can easily understand it. And since mathematical anxiety again is a highly technical term, and so we can begin the writing of your background of the study, of the opening paragraphs of your background of the study, with a definition of the term mathematical anxiety, and then we proceed to the discussion on the meaning, nature, and dynamics of the term. So you may write the opening paragraph of your background of the study with its statement. Mathematical anxiety refers to the individual's unpleasant emotional mood responses when confronted with a mathematical situation. Now, since you do not invent the definition of the term mathematical anxiety, then you need to cite the source of the material from which you are quoting. So again, you do not just invent this definition of mathematical anxiety. The definition of a mathematical anxiety is coming from somebody who is an authority in the field. For example, in this case, I use Eliot. So suppose that this definition of mathematical anxiety is developed by Eliot, then we say mathematical anxiety refers to the individual's unpleasant emotional mood responses when confronted with a mathematical situation. And then we provide, using EPA style, the source using in-text citation. So we say Eliot 2020. And then you may proceed with the discussion on the nature and dynamics of the term mathematical anxiety. And so from that sentence, from the first sentence, a definition of mathematical anxiety, we proceed to discussing the nature and dynamics of the term. For example, you may say, Liu specifically identifies some of the manifestations of this type of anxiety, which includes, but not limited to, depression, helplessness, nervousness, and fearfulness in doing mathematical and numerical tasks. After explaining to your readers the meaning, nature, and dynamics, as well as some historical development, if you wish to, of course, you can include other topics related to mathematical anxiety, but I don't include it here because I want to be, for brevity's sake, I just give those two, I just wrote those two statements. Again, after explaining to your readers the meaning, nature, and dynamics as well as some historical development, if you wish to, historical development of the issue on mathematical anxiety, of the term mathematical anxiety, you may now proceed to showing the problem or gap of the study. And as you may already know, the research gap is the problem that needs to be addressed in the study. This is important because, as I mentioned already, there is no research activity, or no research activity is possible without the research gap or without the research problem. So let us suppose that your research problem or gap is mathematical anxiety can negatively affect not just the academic achievement of the students, but also their future career plans and total well-being. Also, there are no known studies that deal with the mathematical anxiety of junior high school students in New Zealand. So that's the research problem or the research gap. I have a separate discussion on this, on problem formulation and gap spotting, but let me uh, dwell on it a bit. Look, as I mentioned already, the problem is that based on your observation, for example, and your initial interview, the problem is that you notice, or the researcher observes that um, many junior high school students in New Zealand are experiencing mathematical anxiety. And the researcher's contention is that this problem, if left unchecked, will negatively affect their academic performance or their academic achievements. And not just their academic performance, not just their academic achievement, that it will also negatively impact the future career. And in terms, for example, of the educational system, um, if this problem, mathematical anxiety, the experience of the students having mathematical anxiety, may jeopardize the quality of instruction in New Zealand or in the Philippines or in the United States or any other context. So as we can see, there's a problem that needs to be addressed. Okay? And as I mentioned a while ago previously, knowing, by conducting a phenomenological research on this topic, by knowing the lived experiences of the students. For example, by knowing the difficulties and challenges, the researcher will be in the best position to offer some solutions or alternatives to the problem. So this is our gap. This is our problem. Mathematical anxiety can negatively affect not just the academic achievement of the students, but also the future career plans and total well-being. Also, there are no known studies that deal with the mathematical anxiety of junior high school students in New Zealand. And so with this, you may say, if left unchecked, as Shapiro claims, this problem will expand and create a total avoidance pattern on the part of the students, which can be expressed most visibly in the form of cutting classes and habitual absenteeism. As we can see, this will negatively affect the performance of students in mathematics. In fact, the study conducted by Lautenberger and Wimmer revealed that the outcomes of mathematical anxiety do not only negatively affect the students' performance in math-related situations, but also their future career as professionals. Without a doubt, therefore, mathematical anxiety is a recurring problem for many individuals, which will negatively affect the academic success and future career of the student. And now that you already have both explained the meaning, nature, and dynamics of the term mathematical anxiety and articulated the gap of your proposed research, you may now state the main goal of the study. Again, what we're looking for, in addition to the other core elements of the background of the study, are the three major points: research problem or gap that the researcher wants to see addressed in the paper, the one that I just presented, and then second is the research goal, the thesis statements. So again, after articulating the meaning, nature, and dynamics of the term mathematical anxiety, and after articulating the gap of this proposed research, then we proceed to stating the main goal of the study. So we may say, hence, It is precisely in this context that the researcher aims to determine the lived experiences of those students with mathematical anxiety. In particular, this proposed thesis aims to determine the lived experiences of the junior high school students in New Zealand and identify the factors that cause them to become disinterested in mathematics. Please note that you should not just end the first paragraph of your background of the study with the articulation of the research goal. You also need to articulate a thesis statement, the third one, the thesis statement, the main arguments, the compelling reasons why you wish to pursue this study. So you also need to articulate the thesis statement, which usually comes after the research goal. For example, you may say, the researcher argues that there is a need to determine the lived experiences of these students with mathematical anxiety because knowing and understanding the difficulties and challenges that they have encountered will put the researcher in the best position to offer some alternatives to the problem. Indeed, it is only when we have performed some kind of diagnosis that we can offer practicable solutions to the problem. And in the case of the junior high school students in New Zealand who are having mathematical anxiety, determining the lived experiences as well as identifying the factors that cause them to become disinterested in mathematics are the very first steps in addressing the problem. So you see, with this, we can now have the opening paragraphs of the background of the study. So, if we combine the bits and pieces that we have written above, we can now come up with the opening paragraphs of the background of the study, which reads, and as you can notice, the opening in the sample that I am presenting to you, the opening paragraphs are composed of two paragraphs in the opening paragraphs of this background of the study. Sometimes you can just have one paragraph if you have the habit. Some scholars have the habit of writing longer paragraphs, that's fine. But in this case, I have two paragraphs. And if you imagine the sitting cat with the head, the body, and the tail, these two paragraphs represent the head of the cat. And the next discussion will be the body of the cat. But before we proceed to that, let me read again our opening paragraphs. And it goes, mathematical anxiety refers to the individual's unpleasant emotional mood responses when confronted with a mathematical situation. Liu specifically identifies some of the manifestations of this type of anxiety, which include but not limited to depression, helplessness, nervousness, and fearfulness in doing mathematical and numerical tasks. If left to rule unchecked, as Shapiro claims, this problem will expand and create a total avoidance pattern on the part of the students, which can be expressed most visibly in the form of cutting classes and habitual absenteeism. As we can see, this will negatively impact the performance of the students in mathematics. In fact, the study conducted by Luttenberger and Wimmer revealed that the outcomes of mathematical anxiety do not only negatively affect the students' performance in math-related situations, but also their future career as professionals. Without a doubt, therefore, mathematical anxiety is a recurring problem for many individuals, which will negatively affect the academic success and future career of the student. Hence, it is precisely in this context that the researcher aims to determine the lived experiences of those students with mathematical anxiety. Problem and the research goal. And then the next paragraph, I articulate again the research goal and the thesis statements. It reads, in particular, this proposed thesis aims to determine the lived experiences of the junior high school students in New Zealand and identify the factors that cause them to become disinterested in mathematics. The researcher argues that there is a need to determine the lived experiences of these students with mathematical anxiety because knowing and understanding the difficulties and challenges that they have encountered will put the researcher in the best position to offer alternatives to the problem. Indeed, it is only when we have performed some kind of a diagnosis that we can offer practicable solutions to the problem. And in the case of the junior high school students in New Zealand who are having mathematical anxiety, determining their lived experiences, as well as identifying the factors that cause them to become disinterested in mathematics, are the very first steps in addressing the problem. Okay? So we have beautiful or beautifully written opening paragraphs of the background of the study with the problem mathematical anxiety, or with the topic mathematical anxiety. As we can see, we can find in the first paragraph 5 essential elements that must be articulated in the background of the study. Going back to this now, our previous discussion of the core elements. So you see, in the opening paragraphs, we gave our readers, we provided our readers or panel members with the necessary information that will help them understand what we're doing, why we are doing it, okay? And the reason, the main argument for the conduct of this study. So again, we can find in the first paragraph, or in the opening paragraphs, 5 essential elements that must be articulated in the background of the study. Namely, again, 1, a brief discussion on what is known about the topic under investigation. We briefly define what mathematical anxiety is and briefly discuss its nature and dynamics. Second, an articulation of the research gap or problem that needs to be addressed. Third, what the researcher would like to do or aim to achieve in the study, the research goal. Then we have the thesis statements, that is the main arguments or claim of the paper. And 5, the major significance or contribution of the study to the particular discipline. Okay, so and we don't have a hypothesis. We don't provide a hypothesis here because the studies are the study is a qualitative one, right? It's using a phenomenological research design. So in qualitative research, we don't have hypothesis, of course. So that's how you write the opening paragraphs of your background of the study. The next lesson will talk about writing the body of the background of the study. Okay, so I now move to the second topic on the techniques in writing the background of the study. So how do we write the body of the background of the study? I wrote here, if we liken the background of the study to a sitting cat, then the opening paragraphs, as I already mentioned, that we have just completed in the previous section, would just represent the head of the cat, the introductory parts, the opening paragraphs. Because, of course, in writing, we always have this structure, sitting cat. We have the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. And so what we have done so far is the opening paragraphs or the head of the cat, the introductory paragraphs. So we now proceed to the body of the cards. So this means that we still have to write the body of the cards and the conclusion, the tail. But how do we write the body of the background of the study? And what should be its contents? So please take note that, again, as I mentioned already, this is very important because many young scholars, masters, even PhD students do not know this technique. They sometimes write their background of the study as if they are writing a literature review. Now, and then there's a very common mistake because they don't know what to do after articulating the problem, the goal, and the thesis statements. So again, the common mistakes that young scholars commit is that they just write whatever they want to write, to the point that it appears that the background of the study is like a conglomeration of random thoughts taken from somewhere to anywhere, from different angles. So to avoid getting stuck in the writing of of the background of the study, or the body or the background of the study, and to avoid major revision. If you're writing a thesis proposal or dissertation proposal, we need to know this technique. And so you need to know what to write in the body of the cards, in the body of your background of the study, at least in this context. Truly, this is one of the most difficult challenges that fledgling scholars face, because they are not, because they are, because they are inexperienced researchers and didn't know what to do next. They just wrote whatever they wished to write. But fortunately, this is relatively easy if you know the technique, or if you know the rule of thumb, or the rules of thumb in writing this part of the background of the study. So one of the best ways to write the body of the background of the study is to attack it from the vantage point of the research gap or research problem. What do I mean by that? If you recall, when we articulated the research gap in the opening paragraphs, we made a bold claim there. That is, there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. That's a huge claim. And we have to remember that. Or let me just read this one, because what I'll be sharing will be included in this paragraph. So now you have to remember that a statement remains an assumption until you can provide concrete proofs to it. And this is what we call the epistemological aspects of research. As we may already know, epistemology is a specific branch of philosophy that deals with the validity of knowledge. From the Greek word episteme, which means knowledge, and logos, which means study or reason, then epistemology is a specific branch of philosophy that deals with the validity of knowledge. So, and to validate knowledge is to provide concrete proofs to our statements. So, if the statement again, if we could not provide proofs to our statements, then that statement remains an assumption. Hence, the reason why we need to provide proofs to our claim that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety is the obvious fact that if there are none, in other words, if there are no students or no junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety, then we cannot proceed with our study. Then we have no one to interview in the first place. In short, we don't have respondents. So the question is, how do we know that indeed there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety? So the next task is to provide proofs to this claim. Before I proceed, let me share this experience with you. There was one time that a panel, in a thesis defense, I'm not part of the panel, but I heard that the researcher was allowed to proceed with the conduct of, was allowed to proceed with the data gathering. And then when the researcher was already in the fields, the topic was online gaming addiction in Leyte National High School. And the idea is, when the researcher went to the field, to the research locale, to the field to gather data, he could not find students who are students that can be considered online gaming addicts. And so, to make the long story short, there were no respondents. The researcher did not have respondents because there were no students who can be considered as online gaming addicts. And so that means, look, there are no proofs to the fact or to the statements or to the assumption that there are online gaming addicts in Leyte National High School. So in this case, going back to this example, because we claim that junior high school students in New Zealand are experiencing mathematical anxiety, again, the question is, how do we know that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety? What are our proofs in claiming this? And so if we don't have, or if there are no junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety, then again, as I mentioned, we don't have respondents. And so therefore, we could not proceed with the research. Yeah? And so the body of the background of the study, therefore, should be a presentation and articulation of the proofs to our claim that indeed there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. So we will be writing the body of the background of the study from this vantage point. We will be presenting proofs to our claim that indeed there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. Okay, so that's part of our outline in writing the background of the study in this example. Please note, however, that this idea is true only if you follow the style of writing the background of the study that I introduced in this video lecture. So take notes that, as I mentioned in the introductory part of this lecture, there are three major parts of this topic: how to write the background of the study. And I am just presenting to you some of the styles or techniques in writing the background of the study. So what I have been sharing with you so far is not just the only way to write the background of the study, but it's just one of the styles out there. So, uh, so please avoid running the risk of reductionism. That once you gain insights from this video lecture, you think that this is the only way to write the background of the study. Again, no, this is my style is just one of the techniques out there, one of the styles out there. So let's proceed with the writing of the body of the background of the study. So how do we write the background of the study now? One of the best ways to do this is to look for literature on mathematical anxiety among junior high school students in New Zealand and cite them here. However, if there are not enough literature on this topic in New Zealand, then we need to conduct initial interviews with these students or make actual classroom observations and record instances of mathematical anxiety among these students. Take note again that your main task here in writing the body of the background of the study, in this case, mathematical anxiety, is to provide concrete proofs to your claim, to our claim, that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. However, it is always a good idea if we combine literature review with interviews and actual observations. So before I proceed, this is why I always, when I advise master's and PhD students, we always begin with problem formulation. So we spend enough time talking about the problem that they want to see addressed in their paper, why they want to do it, and blah 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 blah. And then once the research problem or research gap is approved, then we prepare for the writing of the background of the study. And my style is that before I ask my students or my advisee to write the background of their study, I ask them to read a lot of literature first, and then related literature, of course, and then I normally ask them to conduct preliminary interviews and observations, especially if the design that they're employing is case study or or ethnography or qualitative method in general. So, as we already know, interviews and observations are one of the best sources of data, primary data in qualitative research. Uh, Even in of course in quantitative research methods. So, I ask my students, my advice is to conduct preliminary interviews and observation, and read literature, related literature, take down notes, and then once they have the inputs, the data, the initial data that they need in writing the background of the study, uh, um, I ask them to come up with on an outline of their background of the study. And please take notes, by the way, please take note that um, I normally don't ask my advisees to provide me or to give me a full-blown thesis proposal. What I normally do is I ask my advisees to write their thesis or dissertation proposal section by section. So I ask them to, after spending time with them, discussing and approving their one-page research gap or the research gap or the research problem, I asked them to write the background of the study. And I told them, do not proceed to the writing of the next section of your thesis or dissertation proposal or thesis as a whole without the previous section having been approved or being approved. So we will finalize the background of the study first before we proceed to the writing of the next section, for example, the literature review, and so on and so forth. So we write the thesis or dissertation section by section, chapter by chapter. Okay, that is why this video lecture, is about how to write the background of the study. And so you can anticipate that my next video lectures for my class in research and seminar will be how to write the literature review, how to write the significance of the study, how to write the methodology of your study using qualitative and quantitative research methods, and so on and so forth. So again, at this point, we focus on the background of the study. Now, assuming that you already have the data, then you may now proceed with the writing of the body of your background of the study. For example, you may say, according to records and based on the researchers' first-hand experience with students and some junior high school students in New Zealand, and take notes, we use the word according to records. We do not just use the phrase according to records for the sake of using it, but we have an important reason why we use that according to records, because when we say according to records, in this case, we are sending a signal to our readers, to our panel members, thesis committee members, that what we are stating here, what we are saying here is not just based on opinion, but a factual one. That when we say according to records, we are sending a signal to our readers that we are, or the researcher, indeed conducted initial data gathering. And in this case, archival research, for example. Now we look for records. And when we say based on the researcher's first-hand experience, meaning to say the researcher conducted initial observations. And again, interviews and observations are primary sources of data in qualitative research. So the statements according to records, the phrase according to records and based on the researcher's first-hand experience. Again, in this phrase, we are sending a signal to our readers, to thesis committee members, that what we are saying here is factual, is based on facts, because we conducted initial archival research, and we conducted initial observations and even interviews. Okay, so let me read this again. According to records and based on the researchers' first-hand experience with students in some junior high schools in New Zealand, indeed, there are students who lost interest in mathematics. So with this statement, this is a concrete proof that indeed there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety because the researcher conducted initial observation. Okay? For one, while checking the daily attendance and monitoring of the students, it was observed that some of them are not always attending classes in mathematics, but are regularly attending the rest of the required subjects. So as you can see, according to records, the students who are experiencing mathematical anxiety intentionally skipped or are always absent in mathematics class, but they're present in other subjects. After the sentence, you may insert some, after this paragraph, or this, after this sentence or this sentences, you may insert some literature that will support this position. For example, you may say, as a matter of fact, this phenomenon is also observed in the work of Istonanto. In his study titled Impacts of Math Anxiety on Academic Performance in pre-calculus of senior high school, Istonanto found out that, inter alia, among others, students with mathematical anxiety have the tendency to intentionally prioritize other subjects and commit habitual tardiness and absences. Now, before I proceed to the next slide, please take note that, look, in research, we need to cite a lot of literature that will support our claim, because this is research. We need to cite literature to show that, look, what we are really doing is not just based on our own interpretation, based on our own experience, based on our own arguments, but look, other scholars are also uh, uh, having this kind of observation. We need to cite literature that will corroborate our findings, our initial findings, our positions, our arguments. And please take note that, although I will discuss this in my other, in part 2 and 3, please take note that when we cite related literature, when we cite a particular scholar in this particular field, we need to see to it that that citation, that contention of a particular scholar, Istonanto in this case, is a support of our contention. It will only serve as a support. It will only underpins our claim. So in other words, in writing, in scholarly writing, for example, we make positions first, we make contentions first, we make arguments first. And since, for example, we make a huge arguments, a loaded argument, and since we are not yet in the authority to make those bold claims, then we need to cite, then we need to look for established scholars who have the authority on the topic to support our claim. And the argument here is, one of the arguments that we need to remember here is that we need to do that in order to play safe. Aside from the fact that we need to cite a lot of literature, or a lot of literature, we need to cite a lot of works of scholars who have the authority in the field to show that indeed what we're doing is one of the megatrends and recent debates in the topic or in this particular discipline. and to show that, look, what we are saying, or in order to show that our initial findings have been corroborated by the findings, the works of these famous scholars. Aside from that fact, we need to cite because we need to play safe. The argument is this: when we make bold claims, again, when we make huge claim, we are making ourselves open to criticism. So when we make an argument, a loaded statement, we expect that people will respond, will react to that. And if, for example, in this case, we make a bold claim that indeed, based on the researchers' first-hand experience, where some students, or with some junior high school in New Zealand, there are students who are experiencing mathematical anxiety, and that's, some of the proofs or manifestations of this mathematical anxiety is disinterest in mathematics, like skipping classes, or not showing interest, disinterest again. So that's a huge claim on the part of the researcher. But again, the researcher remains a fledgling scholar, or maybe is not yet in the authority to say that. So in this case, we need to cite scholars who have the authority in that discipline, so that because we are, again, when we make bold claims, we are making ourselves open to criticism. And so when we cite a scholar, an authority in the field, then we are playing safe. So instead of us being criticized or being critiqued by scholars out there who have mastery in the field, then it's going to be the scholar you cite, Stonanto, in this case. And in addition to that claim, since we cite a scholar who have the authority in this field, then no one will question, in this case, it's Donato. For example, because he is an authority in this field. And most of his, for example, researches on this topic have been used by scholars in the field. He is an authority in the field. So no one will question Stonanto. And since no one will question Stonanto on mathematical anxiety, and since you cite him in your work, then we're safe. Okay? So that's one of the reasons why we need to make citations. That's one of the reasons why we need to look for scholars that will support our claim. So again, that's how we do it. You make an argument first, you make a case first, and look for scholars, literature that could support your claim, so that you will be safe. The problem with many young scholars is that they do it the other way around. They cite a particular literature, and then they explain it. They cite, and then they explain it. No, that's not how we do it. In research writing, where readers are looking for our own interpretation, our own arguments of the issue at hand. And that is why the writing of our research or of our research paper should be narrative and argumentative at the same time. Because as scholars, we are supposed to share our own interpretation, our thoughts about what we have read, about what we have understood, about what we have observed, about what we have, learned from interviews. Readers, panel members, thesis committee members are, after all, are interested in our own understanding and interpretation of the topic at hand. They are not interested in those citations, that you just explained in your paper. So it should be the other way around. Make an argument first, make a case first, and then look for scholars, literature that could support your claim. And after that, you may proceed saying, with this initial knowledge in mind, the researcher conducted initial interviews with some of these students. The researcher learned that one student did not regularly attend his math subject because he believed that he is not good in math, and no matter how he listens to the topic, he will not learn. Then you may say, another student also mentioned that she was influenced by her friend's perception that mathematics is hard. Hence, she avoids the subject. Indeed, these are concrete proofs that there are some junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. As already hinted about, as already hinted, disinterest or the loss of interest in mathematics is one of the manifestations of mathematical anxiety. So before I proceed, as you can see, what we are saying here, what we are articulating here are again proofs to our claim in the opening paragraphs that indeed again and again and again there are junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. Okay? Please remember again that what we're doing at the moment is writing the body of the background of the study. And again, we are providing the proofs to that claim. That should be the content of the body of your background of the study. Now, if we combine what we have just written above, then we can have the first two paragraphs of the body of our background of the study. And it reads, according to records and based on the researchers' first-hand experience with students in some junior high schools in New Zealand, indeed, there are students who lost interest in mathematics. For one, while checking the daily attendance and monitoring of the students, it was observed that some of them are not always attending classes in mathematics, but are regularly attending the rest of the required subjects. As a matter of fact, this phenomenon is also observed in the work of Istonanto. In his study titled Impact of Math Anxiety on Academic Performance in Pre-Calculus of Senior High School, Istonanto found out that, inter alia, students with mathematical anxiety have the tendency to intentionally prioritize other subjects and commit habitual tardiness and absences. With this initial knowledge in mind, the researcher conducted initial interviews with some of these students. The researcher learned that one student did not regularly attend his math subject because he believed that he is not good in math, and no matter how he listens to the topic, he will not learn. Another student also mentioned that she was influenced by her friend's perception that mathematics is hard. Hence, she avoids the subject. Indeed, see, we have these qualifying statements, concluding statements to show that indeed there are concrete proofs to our claim. It reads, indeed, these are concrete proofs that there are some junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. As already hinted, disinterest or the loss of interest in mathematics is one of the manifestations of mathematical anxiety. And then you need to validate this observation by conducting another round of interview and observation in other schools. This is still part of the body of this background of the study. So you may continue writing the background of the study with this. And it reads, to validate the information gathered from the initial interviews and observations, the researcher conducted another round of interview and observation with other junior high school students in New Zealand. On the one hand, the researcher found out that during mathematics time, some students felt uneasy. In fact, they showed a feeling of being tense or anxious while working with numbers and mathematical problems. Some were even afraid to sit in front, while some students at the back were secretly playing with their mobile phones. These students also show remarkable apprehension during board works like trembling hands, nervous laughter, and the like. So as you can see, these are concrete proofs or concrete manifestations of mathematical anxiety. So you see, We're able to write the body of this background of the study easily because we conducted initial interview, we conducted initial observations and archival research. And we are able to write, or the researcher is able to write this body, the body of the background of the study, of this background of the study, because he or she or we know what to do in writing the background of the study. Then provide some literature that will support your position. I need to explain this further. So you may say, as Finlayson corroborates, emotional symptoms of mathematical anxiety involve feeling of helplessness, lack of confidence, and being nervous for being put on the spot. Again, just to reiterate, you made a bold claim, we made a bold claim in the previous statements that, for example, trembling hands, nervous laughter, and the like are concrete manifestations of mathematical anxiety. The question is, how do you know that these manifestations or these are concrete manifestations of mathematical anxiety? So I am, as a scholar, I am, under attack. I am criticized, or I am asked by the reader or the panel. And so to play safe again, I need to look for scholars or literature that could support my claim. And that is why, again, I cited Finlayson. And so if somebody criticized me or questioned me, my claim, then I will say, hey, look, no less than. The famous scholar, Finlayson, on mathematical anxiety, said that emotional symptoms of mathematical anxiety involve feeling of helplessness, lack of self-confidence or lack of confidence, and being nervous for being put in the spot. So you see, the claim, the arguments or the contention of Finlayson is the same with my contention, that trembling hands, nervous laughter are manifestations of mathematical anxiety. So you see, Finlayson supports my claim. Let me continue. It must be noted that this occasionally extreme emotional reactions are not triggered by provocative procedures. As a matter of fact, there are no personally sensitive questions or intentional manipulations of stress. The teacher simply asks a very simple question like identifying the parts of a circle. And yet students, have this feeling of helplessness and lack of confidence and nervous laughter, things like that. Certainly, this observation also conforms with the study of Ashcroft when he mentions that students with mathematical anxiety show a negative attitude towards math and hold self-perceptions about their mathematical anxiety. So in this paragraph, you notice that the researcher cites several famous scholars in the field. We need to do this. We need citations again in order to show to our readers that what we're doing is indeed research, in order to show to our readers that, look, what we're doing is really a research one because it involves referring to other famous scholars in the field who could help and support our claim. If we don't have citations, it could not, our piece of work cannot be considered research. Of course, this is in addition to the fact that, again, as I already mentioned, we need to cite famous scholars in the field in order to support our claim. And then you may proceed. On the other hand, when the class had their other subjects, the students show a feeling of excitement. When they proceed to the other class, they're excited, but in mathematics class, they show disinterest. They even hurried to sit in front and attentively participating in the class discussion without hesitation and without the feeling of being tense or anxious. For sure, this is another concrete proof that there are junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. Take note again that we close the discussion with the reiteration of the claim that, or the statement that, these are proofs to the huge claim that we articulated, that we mentioned, that we lay down in the opening paragraphs of the background of the study. And then we are not yet done with the body of the study. We need to push the idea further. We need to exhaust all the possibilities. We need to provide, if possible, all the necessary proofs to our claim so that nobody will question us. So that when you defend your thesis proposal or your thesis as a whole, you won't get a major revision from the panel. To further prove the point that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety, you may solicit observations from other math teachers. For example, you may say, the researcher further verified if the problem is also happening in other sections and whether other mathematics teachers experience the same observation that the researcher had. This validation or verification is important in establishing credibility of the claim and ensuring reliability and validity of the assertion. In this regard, the researcher attempted to open up the issue of math anxiety during the Departmentalized Learning Action Cell, or LAC, a group discussion of educators per quarter with the objective of teaching strategies to develop critical thinking of the students. During the session, one teacher corroborates the researcher's observation that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. The teacher pointed out that truly there were students who showed no extra effort in mathematics class, in addition to the fact that some students really avoided the subject. In addition, another math teacher expressed her frustrations about these students who have mathematical anxiety. She quipped, how can a teacher develop the critical thinking skills or ability of the students if in the first place these students show avoidance and disinterest in the subject? Now again, if we combine what we have just written above, the body of the background of the study, then we can now have the remaining parts of the body of the background of the study, and it reads. I am now putting together the bits and pieces about the body of this background of the study. It reads, to validate the information gathered from the initial interviews and observations, the researcher conducted another round of interview and observations with other junior high school students in New Zealand. On the one hand, the researcher found out that during mathematics time, some students felt uneasy. In fact, they showed a feeling of being tense or anxious while working with numbers and mathematical problems. Some were even afraid to sit in front, while some students at the back were secretly playing with their mobile phones. These students also show remarkable apprehension during board works like trembling hands and nervous laughter and the like. As Finlayson corroborates, emotional symptoms of mathematical anxiety involve feeling of helplessness, lack of confidence, and being nervous for being put on the spot. It must be noted that these occasionally extreme emotional reactions are not triggered by provocative procedures. As a matter of fact, there are no personally sensitive questions or intentional manipulations of stress. The teacher simply asks a very simple question like identifying the parts of a circle. Certainly, this observation also conforms with the study of Ashcraft when he mentions that students with mathematical anxiety show a negative attitude towards math and hold self-perceptions about their mathematical abilities. On the other hand, when the class had their other subjects, the students show a feeling of excitement. They even hurried to sit in front and attentively participating in the class discussion without hesitation and without the feeling of being tense or anxious. For sure, this is another concrete proof that there are junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. The researcher further verified if the problem is also happening in other sections and whether other mathematics teachers experience the same observation that is that the researcher had. This validation or verification is important in establishing credibility of the claim and ensuring reliability and validity of assertion. In this regard, the researcher attempted to open up the issue of math anxiety during the departmentalized learning action cell, a group discussion of educators per quarter with the objective of teaching strategies to develop critical thinking of the students. During the session, one teacher corroborates the researcher's observation that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who have mathematical anxiety. The teacher pointed out that truly there were students who showed no extra effort in mathematics class, in addition to the fact that some students really avoided the subject. In addition, another math teacher expressed her frustrations about the students who have mathematical anxiety. She quipped, "How can a teacher develop the critical thinking skills or ability of the students if, in the first place, these students show avoidance and disinterest in the subject?" So that's how we write the body of the background of the study in research. Of course, you may add any relevant points which you think might amplify your contents. So again, what I am presenting is simply a concise, succinct form of the background of the study. At least it contains not all, but at least the techniques in writing the background of the study, and I'm sure it will guide you in writing your own background of the study. What is important at this point is that you now have a clear idea of how to write the body of the background of the study. Now let me proceed to the last part, how to write the concluding part of the background of the study. So if you go back to the image of the sitting cat, again, we have the introductory parts of the background of the study represented by the head of the cat. And then we have the body of the cat, of course, it's the body of the background of the study. And then we still have, you know, to complete the concluding parts, the tail of the cat. So this is now the concluding parts. This is how to write the concluding parts of this background of the study. So let me just read this again and do some side discussion. Since we have already completed the body of our background of the study in the previous section, we may now write the concluding part or the concluding paragraph. That is the tail of the cat. This is important because one of the rules of thumb in writing is that we always put a close to what we have started. So don't leave the discussion hanging. You need to close it before you proceed to the next topic. It is important to note that the conclusion of the background of the study is just a rehashing using this style, of course. This is just for this argument is just for the style of writing. I will explain later on, especially when in part two, where I discuss deductive style of writing. But at least at this point, this is the first example. So again, it is important to note that the conclusion of the background of the study is just a rehashing of the research gap and main goal of the study stated in the introductory paragraph, but framed differently, of course. So the tail of the cat simply rehashed the goal and thesis statements and problem that we articulate in the opening paragraphs. The purpose of this is just to emphasize, after presenting the justifications, what the study aims to attain and why it wants to do it. Okay? The conclusion, therefore, will look just like this. So we can have just one paragraph for the conclusion, and it reads, for example, this is just an example. Given the above discussion, it is evident that there are indeed junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. And as we can see, mathematical anxiety can negatively affect not just the academic achievement of the students, but also their future career plans and total well-being. Again, it is for this reason. Again, we use the word again because we're just rehashing what we mentioned in the opening paragraphs. Again, it is for this reason that the researcher attempts to determine the lived experiences of those junior high school students in New Zealand who are experiencing mathematical anxiety. So, if we combine all that we have written from the very beginning, the entire background of the study would now read. So I will now be reading, or I can escape these parts, okay, because I've been reading this already, okay. So if we combine again what we have written so far, the result is this: a full-blown, beautifully written background of the study. And in actual thesis writing, of course, the format is um, we double space, we use double space, and then we need we need to set the margins and things like that. So if we, for example, use Times New Romans and font 12, and then we double space this, and then we we set the margins of the paper, and then normally, if we not normally, but this background of the study could just be between 4 and 5 pages. And please take note that the background of the study should not be very long, 10 pages. Of course, that depends on a particular topic and discipline. But normally, the background of study is just short, 4 to 5 pages, 3 to 5 pages are enough, as long as, just like in this example, as long as you have articulated, or you have written the background of the study based on the rules of that I just shared in this video lecture. Okay, so I will no longer read the entire background of the study, but again, if we combine those bits and pieces, then the result is this. Okay, so mathematical anxiety refers to blah 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 blah. Again, I no longer read this one, but let me just show this one. So that's the first screenshots of the entire background of the study. Then you have continue this. That's it. Okay. So if we analyze the background of the study that we have just completed, we can observe that in addition to the important elements that it should contain, as I mentioned a while ago, the 6 elements or the 5 elements, it has also addressed other important elements that readers or thesis committee members expect from it. And please take note of this: the importance of writing the background of the study based on those rules of thumb. Right? On the one hand, it provides the researcher with a clear direction in the conduct of the study. As we can see, the background of the study that we have just completed enables us to move in the right direction with a strong focus, as it has set clear goals and the reasons why we want to do it. Indeed, we now exactly know what to do next and how to write the rest of the research paper or thesis. So this is what I mentioned in the opening, or in the introductory part of this lecture, that the background of the study is the most important parts of a research paper, because it is where we articulate the problem or the research gap and the goal and the thesis statements. And when we articulate these 3 major points, then it set the sail of the research journey. So with a clear goal and a problem and the reason why we need to do it and the justifications to our claim, then we can anticipate, what to write in the next sections, like what literature to look for, what methodology to employ in this case, what methods rather to employ. And so in this case, obviously, we will be employing a qualitative research method with phenomenological research design. And we will be employing interviews as research instruments. Eh? On the other hand, most researchers start their research with scattered ideas and usually get stuck with how to proceed further. As I mentioned a while ago as well, the common complaints of researchers, fledgling or not, is that sometimes they get stuck along the way and don't know what to do next. But with a clear plan and with a full appreciation of the techniques in writing, the background of the study, the ones that I had just shared in this video lecture, then we can have, a researcher can have a clear, idea of what to do next. But with a well-written background of the study, just as the one above, the one that I just shared with you, we have decluttered and organized our thoughts. So if you read again, if you go back to the discussion, if you read the entire paper, then we notice that the writing of the background of the study is very logical. The flow of argument is logical. It does not appear that it is just a conglomeration of random thoughts and blah, blah, blah. And as you can observe, the writing of the background of the study is based on a particular plan. There is a plan on how to do it. The head, the body, the tail. In the head, you need to articulate the research goal, the problem, the research goal, and the thesis statement. And in the body, you need to provide the concrete proofs to the huge claim that we articulated in the opening paragraphs or in the head of the cards, and then in the tail of the cards, we rehash what we articulated in the opening paragraphs. So it's very logical and clear. We have also become aware of what we have and have not been done in our area of study, as well as what we can significantly contribute in the already existing body of knowledge in this study. Please note, however, as I already mentioned previously, that the model that I have just presented here is only one of the many models available in textbooks and other sources. You are, of course, free to choose your own style of writing the background of the study. You may also consult your thesis supervisor for some guidance on how to attack the writing of your background of the study. Lastly, and as you may already know, universities around the world have their own thesis formats. Hence, you should follow your university's rules on the format and style in writing your research or thesis. What is important is that with the lessons that you learned in this course or in this discussion, you can now easily, I hope so, write the introductory part of your thesis, that is, the background of the study. Thank you, and I hope that this video lecture helps. I wish you all the best in writing your concept paper as one of the requirements in Education 505, that is Research Seminar and Practicum, Research Practicum Seminar, Research Seminar and Practicum, and I wish you all the best in writing your thesis proposal. And I wish you all the best in your future career as scholars, as professors, as academicians. Thank you very much.